everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at one of Z-Man Games' newest releases. We're going to take a look at Akrotiri, which is a game by the designers of Belfort. That's Jay Cormier, or Cormier, I'm not sure how he pronounces it, to be honest, and Senfung Lim, who, are designers that I've been following for quite some time because of their design of Belfort with Tasty Minstrel, and so I was excited to see that they had a new game coming out through Z-Man that's a two-player pick up and deliver style of game, I guess. So without too much description, why don't we just go ahead and open this up. We'll see how this little two-player game plays, and then we'll come back at the end and we'll get my opinions on Akrotiri. So here you can see the components for Akrotiri, hopefully I'm saying that right, which is a two-player game from Z-Man Games by the designers of Belfort. Now this is a game, as I said, for two players where you're going to be trying to pick up and deliver goods in order to build temples out onto the board, but you're going to be paying specific attention to the types of symbols that are on this board and the types of map cards that you have in your hand in order to try and figure out when you can build those temples and, of course, accumulate enough money to pay for building them. So each player in the game is going to have their own little player board here. You can see that it has their temples right on it, and these temples are covering up numbers or little icons at the bottom of the player sheet. Right now we see 3, and that's the number of actions we get per turn. But as we build more temples, we'll get more actions or more end game victory point conditions that we can kind of work towards. So building temples will give you more actions until it finally ends the game, where this last turn one is unveiled. In addition, you're going to start the game with a couple of map cards. You're going to start with an easy map card. You can tell it's easy because it says it's worth 1 victory point at the top. And you'll start the game with a medium difficulty map card. It says 3 victory points at the top. These map cards on the other side will show you a location of a temple that you must excavate. This temple is located to the north of a tree, to the, I guess it would technically be to the east of a, I guess that's a rock or a mountain, and to the west of some water symbols. And so you'll see these symbols out here. We have a tree over here, there's a mountain, and that's all that's out there right now. But as you place more tiles throughout the game, you will get more of these icons out there. So right now, we could theoretically look at this from the player that's sitting here. Let's say that this person was sitting right here. The perspective is that this forest, or this tree, is to the south of this island, and it's always based on your perspective of where you're sitting at the table. So the player over here would look at this tree as to the north of this island, and this one would be, this player would be to the south of this tree, and this player would be, this island is to the north of that tree. So it's all about your perspective. So you're trying to find an island, for example, this one, that is, if you're sitting right here, to the north of this tree. So this island would qualify. Or even if you were right here on this island, you're still north of that tree by the dividing lines that are on this. It's a little bit hard to explain, but just know you have to be the north and to the appropriate direction of the other islands on the board. The difficult ones or the harder ones will have more icons, so now you have to be to the north of 2 trees if you're sitting on this side. And the hardest ones will, of course, have even more icons. So the harder the card, the harder it is to find a spot that has all of those conditions. You'll also start with an endgame card, which gives you endgame victory points. This one right here says that when at the end of the game, the biggest island you have a temple on is worth 1 point per tile making that island up. It has to be completed, but it will give you 1 point per tile on that island at the end of the game. Finally, you're going to start the game with a couple of dollars and a start game tile. So this start game tile is the same as all of the other tiles, but it's going to be the one you'll play on your next turn. And at the end of your turn, you'll draw another tile that you will play out on the next turn. So you'll always have 1 turn of your opponent to think about where you're going to place your tile. Of course, trying to consider where you're trying to place them on the board in order to make these things true. So if I were the first player and I had the first player marker, on my turn I would follow the layout of what's going out on here. So it tells me on my turn, the first thing I have to do is I have to place my tile. When I place my tile on the board, I can place it anywhere I want so long as it's adjacent to at least one other tile. And basically that's the only restriction. I have to line it up appropriately with the lines that are on the board. And you'll see that these tiles are divided into a grid. So there's 4 different sub-tiles on this tile. And the same is true of all of the tiles. This will be important for determining locations later. So let's say, for example, I'm sitting over here. So let's say that this player is over there. And they want to try and make the condition of their easy card true. So they need to make sure there's some water over this way, so maybe that they can use this island as their potential future island for this placement. So what they're going to do is they're going to place this over on this side, right? They want to place this over here. When they do so, the next thing they must do is they must place out resources. And we did some of this to set up the game, but they must place one blue resource on the icon that they just placed on that tile. And they can place one other resource of any color out onto this tile on any of the other islands. So for example, maybe they want to stockpile this island because they plan on going over there and picking up the resources. So they decide to place a red onto that island. The only stipulation is it can't be the same island and it must be on this tile. Once they're done with this, they're going to proceed with their actions, and we'll see that they get 3 actions on their turn. My 3 actions can be a variety of different things, and so they can be movement. So we'll see that each player controls a boat, and I'm the black player. I am starting at this port on the central island of Thera, and I can move for 1 movement action as far as I would like along these routes to another port. So maybe I want to move all the way over here to this port. When I move there, that is 1 action. However, since my boat is empty, I technically get 2 movement for having an empty boat. So what I could do is if I wanted to, I could move to an island and then portage across it. Portage allows me to move from any one dock on an island to any other one dock on an island. So if I really wanted to, I could actually move over here through the other player and then take my second movement to move around. At this point, that's kind of a moot point. But note that if your boat is empty, you get 2 movements for 1 action. So I'm going to move over here, I'm going to land at this dock, and that's my first action. The second type of action could be to load resources. So let's say I want to use one of my actions, and you can track your actions with these little fish tokens if you want to. I tend not to use them, but if you're forgetful, they're good to have. But I could use my second action to load up to 3 goods onto my boat. It's 3 because the boat can only hold 3 goods. So I decide to load one cube from this island, it's the only cube there, onto my boat. Now you're asking, why didn't I go and pick up these goods over here? Well, the problem is, if you look, I can't get there. There are no paths to get to that island. There's no way for me to portage over an island to get there. So there's no way for me to go and grab those goods at this point, and maybe a future tile will connect it so that there is. My third action, or the third type of action you can do, is excavating. Well, unfortunately, none of my maps currently lead to any of the conditions that are out here. There's certainly not enough icons on the board for this ever to be true for any of the islands, and unfortunately right now, despite how it is, none of the islands happen to have both a tree to the south, a water to the east, and a mountain to the west from this player's perspective. So hopefully a mountain will show up over here in a future turn, and maybe they can do that. So the next option is they could buy maps. You can see these map cards over here. You have the option of buying maps. You have to go back to the main island, so I would have to move again, and that would be my third action, is to move. So I certainly can't buy maps, but if I had an extra action, I could spend $1, $3, or $7 to buy 1, 2, or 3 map cards. And these are cards that I could use, of course, to try and excavate future areas later and earn 1, 3, or 7 victory points. So depending on how many you want to buy, you spend $1, $3, or $7 and buy 1, 2, or 3 maps of any difficulty. The final actions are going to the Oracle. So we'll talk about going to the Oracle right now. What I could do is, instead of moving back and selling my cube, I could go to the Oracle. And going to the Oracle will allow me to look for a particular tile in this deck that has a particular symbol on it. So say I decided that I was going to take things into my own hand and try and find a tile with a mountain on it. I would say mountains, spending my last action, and flip through here until I found a tile that had a mountain on it. So I would start looking through them and say, I'm going to flip through here until I found a mountain. So it could be quite some time. There's one. I would keep this tile, add it to my own area, and that's the tile I will have to play next turn. The remainder of these tiles will simply be discarded. So that's the only action you can take with the remainder of your actions, is discard that, or you could have moved back to Thera. Using the Oracle would allow me to prepare for next turn when I would maybe be able to excavate a temple. But I'm just going to skip that for now and plan that hopefully my opponent will do something that benefits me. So I'm going to move back. Now, as a free action on your turn, I've used up all of my 3 basic actions, but as a free action on your turn, if you're at Thera, you can sell cubes back to the market. That's what this is right here. I have landed at Thera with my third action, 1 to move out, 1 to load, and 1 to move back. And now I would like to sell my cube. In doing so, I'm going to sell it back to Thera, put it back onto the market, and we'll see that I get 2 drachma. So, as the 2 I already have, plus 2 more, I now have 4 drachma. That will allow me to end my turn, and I would pass the turn to the next player who would do the same. Now we're going to skip their turn and talk a little bit about excavating temples, and we'll just say that they decided to place this temple out here, like this. They would have had to add a gray cube, and maybe they added a blue cube to this island. But at this point, we're pretty much ready to go. So our next player is going to start their turn. They have their tile, and they are going to start by placing their tile onto the board. Now maybe they need to get to this island right here, so they're trying to find a way where they can place out and get to that island right there, perhaps by placing like this. Alright, so they place their tile. At the start of their turn, they're going to place out the appropriate cubes. Maybe they put this one here. And on their turn, they're going to start by moving, and they want to get to excavate this turn. So what they're going to do is they're going to start out, and they're going to use their first movement to go all the way up here to this island. Once they're on this island, they're going to use their second action to excavate. Now, the condition we're looking for is an island, the island we're at, that happens to have water to the east, right here. It's to the east of that island. You're looking for trees to the south, right here. That's that island. And you're looking for mountains to the west, right there. That's that. So from the guiding lines that we're on, looking at this island, the guiding lines are right here. And right there, you need to look south of that line. Right here is the last south line. South of that line for the trees, and east and west for the other two things. And this condition is met. So what I would have to do is pay the 3 drachma to place the temple onto that island. And I would take an island from my area and place it out onto this. Now you'll note that dependent on where on the island you're talking about, this could change the condition. It doesn't matter, you get to place it on any portion of that island that you want, and then you can make it meet the conditions by placing on different sections. So say for example that the tree was right here instead of way down here. Still, by placing on this portion of the island, the tree would be to the south and the conditions would still be satisfied. But it's very important to take that into consideration. You'll now note that I've uncovered a 4. And so now that I've got a 4 uncovered, on my next turn I would get 4 actions. So this is going to let you have more actions in order to try and do more things. But as the board becomes more complex, you will need to do more things. This player has now successfully placed one of their temples and would likely take their third action to pick this cube up and end their turn. And then the next player, of course, the other player would do whatever they were going to do. And this would go on in this manner until somebody managed to place all of their temples. If this is the first player that places all of their temples, they have this little first player marker, the other player would get one more turn. If it was not the first player that placed all of their temples, then the game would simply end. Now it's important to note that when you place a couple of these temples, you get different bonuses. You don't get more actions, you get to draw some more of these endgame cards. So once you hit your second temple, you draw 2 cards, look at the potential bonuses and keep them. So maybe it's for every island that you've built on that has a tree, or every island that you built on that has a volcano, you get 2 points. You would decide which one of those is better for you. And choose one of them and put the other one on the bottom of the deck. And you would do this again when you got to the later same icon. But basically you're going to play until somebody places all of their temples and then finish out the round. At the end of the game, you're going to get points for each of the temples that you excavated, so basically excavating harder temples will be worth more points, 1, 3, or 7 per temple, depending on how hard it was to excavate. You'll get points for your goal cards, so as I said, you're going to look at each of those goal cards you accumulated and score each of those, and you're going to get 1 point for every 10 drachma you have at the end of the game, which shouldn't be a lot, I wouldn't imagine, but if you somehow hoarded money, you could get some points that way. And whoever has the most points will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Akrotiri from Z-Man Games, a new 2-player from the designers of Belfort. Now, this game is a little bit lighter than my usual fare, and so correspondingly, I probably like it a little bit less simply because it's on the lighter side of things. That's not to say I don't like it. I just wanted to preface everything that comes from this point with lighter games tend to get worse reviews from me, right? Because I like heavier games in general. But that doesn't mean I didn't like this one. There are several things I like about this, so let's start talking about that now. The game takes pick up and deliver, which I am typically a fan of, and combines it with something like the tile placement from Carcassonne, giving you kind of a spatial aspect that you have to consider in the design of the board. So you need to pay attention to where you're placing your tiles because of the icons on the islands. Those icons are important, 1, for placing resources out on the board, and 2, for the final excavation of your islands, or of your, temples. You need to know where they're being placed and place them appropriately in order to excavate temples, which of course is victory points. They're also important because of the shipping routes on those tiles. So the shipping routes will limit your access to specific islands. And in order to build or pick up resources from those islands, you need to be able to access them. So that's second to why you might want to place a tile somewhere. Third is, of course, the resources in general and the ports on those different islands. Placing things can block an opponent from getting to a specific area or make it much more difficult, or open it up to you. So there's a lot of reasons to consider very strongly where you're placing a tile. The game is very strongly driven by limited movement, right? The idea of the game, I think in general, kind of the core design concept is that you have a limited amount of movement, and you're going to try and figure out from that movement how you can get to places, access them, and of course excavate your temples. And so you get more actions throughout the game, and that's going to give you more ability to move places. Now with that said, I think there might be a little bit of a tendency towards running away in the game. I don't know, by any stretch of the imagination that this is true, but I can see how it might be true, given that as you succeed in the game by building temples, you're given more actions. However, the game is rapidly expanding, the area you're playing in is rapidly expanding, and hopefully around the same time each player will be able to excavate their first temple, get another action, expand a little bit further out, get another goal, and so forth and so on. So while it's not necessarily true, I could see how it could theoretically happen if somebody really were to end up with bad cards or bad positioning from the icons that get played out. With that said, I enjoy the game quite a bit. I think it's an interesting take on pick up and deliver combined with spatial reasoning, and if you don't have spatial reasoning, you're not going to like it, because you have to be paying attention to where those icons are in order to do really anything in the game that's going to lead to victory. So, if that sounds good to you, definitely check it out. I think it's got some very interesting aspects to it. I think it's going to be a great game for lighter to medium players who like thinky pick up and delivers with spatial reasoning, and I definitely suggest checking it out. That's Akrotiri from Z-Man Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.